Halloween, celebrated every year on the 31st of October, is the third most celebrated holiday in the United States. It's known as a night of dressing in costumes, eating candy, watching scary movies, playing pranks, and having a good time. Families decorate their houses with spooky decorations, and children go door to door asking for candy, called trick-or-treating. Halloween is a holiday filled with folklore and urban legends. Many believe the holiday to be evil and satanic, and others see it as a fun, spooky, and secular tradition, a bit of harmless fun. But most people don't know the true origins of this holiday, nor its interesting and varied history. Your personal data is everywhere. Shared, sold, and exposed online without your knowledge. But what if you could take back control? Meet Incogni, the service that helps protect your privacy effortlessly. Incogni works behind the scenes, contacting data brokers on your behalf to remove your personal information, keeping your identity safe from prying eyes. And they repeat this process whenever your personal info is published again. All you have to do is create an account, agree to let them work for you, and observe as they go to work protecting your privacy online. With just a few clicks, Incogni takes the hassle out of managing your online privacy. No stress, no wasted time, just peace of mind. Take back your privacy today. Visit incogni.com/papers or click the link in the description or pinned comment because your data belongs to you. Thanks to Incogni for sponsoring, and now back to the video. Samhain was a harvest festival celebrated by the Celts in the British Isles, most notably in Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. And yes, it's pronounced Samhain, not Samhain, despite its spelling. Celtic days started at sundown, so Samhain was celebrated on the evening of October 31st, ending at sundown on November 1st. We don't know when Samhain started. It's first attested in Old Irish literature in around the 9th century, but most experts agree it probably dates back further to the pagan Celts. Ancient Celtic Samhain is a bit of a mystery, as most of what we know about the Celts comes from outside sources, because they didn't keep written records themselves. But by the Middle Ages, we know it was a harvest festival and Gaelic New Year's celebration. In Irish legend, it was the night the membrane between our world and the other world was thinnest. The other world was the world of the fairies, called Is She in Irish, but in some versions it was the land of the dead as well. Some reported traditions during Samhain were lighting ritual bonfires, telling the future, and of course, as it was a harvest festival, feasting. By the 1500s, Samhain had been completely absorbed into Halloween and All Saints' Day, but it still kept some of its pagan character. Speaking of All Saints' Day is a Catholic holiday celebrated on the 1st of November. It was originally on the 13th of May, the day Pope Boniface IV rechristened the Pantheon in Rome from a pagan temple to a Christian church, dedicated to Mary and all the martyrs. The 13th of May was the last day of the Roman festival of Lemuria, a festival to the dead, so it's assumed that this was a way to co-opt a familiar pagan celebration and, like the Pantheon itself, Christianize it. So when did the holiday move from May to November, and why? Well, Pope Gregory III made this change in the mid-8th century, but as tempting as it is to assume he made this change to correspond to the Celtic Samhain, the evidence for that is actually somewhat slim. Still, I personally think it's likely, at least more likely than it just being a coincidence. Another word for saint is hallow, so the evening before All Saints' Day became All Hallows' Eve. Over time, that became corrupted to Halloween. In the 11th century, Abbot Odilo, a Benedictine monk, created All Souls' Day, to be observed on the 2nd of November, after All Saints' Day. While All Saints' Day celebrates the saints, those holy people already in heaven, All Souls' Day is a day of prayer for the dead, especially those still in purgatory, a sort of in-between realm imperfect souls must pass through to get to heaven in Catholic theology. So here we have a display showing the most popular symbols of Halloween in the US at least. Let's click on one of the objects to learn about its history. The jack-o'-lantern is the most recognizable symbol of Halloween in America. The tradition comes from Ireland, where they use turnips instead of pumpkins. There's a ghost story that goes along with the tradition, the story of Stingy Jack. Stingy Jack was an unsavory fellow who had a fondness for mischief and booze. Dozens of versions of the story exist, but in each version, Jack tricks the devil twice over. In doing so, he convinces the devil to not take his soul when he dies. So when Jack did eventually die, he found himself barred from hell and from heaven, as such a stingy drunk was not allowed there. So Jack was cursed to wander in the darkness forever, with just a lantern made from a turnip to light his way. The making of turnip lanterns probably predates this story, but the tradition made its way to America by way of Irish and Scottish immigrants. The pumpkin was already a popular symbol of fall, and so they replaced the turnips. Death and the spirits of the dead have been a part of Halloween for its whole history. Samhain was believed to be the night where the membrane between worlds was thinnest, and that sometimes meant between the worlds of the living and the dead. All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day were Christian versions of this idea, and it was believed, even by many Catholics today, that All Hallows' Tide is the time when the souls of loved ones might come back and visit the living. The connection with death became even more apparent starting in the 15th century, when the Black Plague ravaged Europe. Suddenly, a day for honoring the dead became very popular, as essentially everyone in Europe had lost loved ones to the disease that killed as much as 60% of the European population. Holidays like the Mexican Dia de los Muertos or the Day of the Dead show that the connection to death and All Hallows' Tide is still strong. Witches have been associated with Halloween for quite a bit longer than you may think. Starting in the 15th century, after the Black Death had ravaged Europe, a new epidemic rose in its place: witch hunts. Witch hunting and witch killings became an increasingly common practice, perpetrated mostly towards women, but also to other marginalized groups like the mentally disabled. One witch hunting book, called Malleus Maleficarum, reported that Halloween night was an important holiday for witches, called the Witches' Sabbath. On Halloween night, witches would gather and perform rites to commune with dark forces and the devil himself. This was all nonsense, of course, but the connection between Halloween, witches, and the devil stuck. Still, even today, many fundamentalist Christian groups reject Halloween entirely as a satanic holiday, writing books and pamphlets about its evils. Related to witches, we have the Black Cat. Cats became omens of misfortune around the time of the Black Death. You see, the bubonic plague was contracted from fleas that lived on rats. Cats would chase these rats, so an increase in the cat population in a specific area often signaled an outbreak of the plague. Medieval people, misunderstanding how diseases spread, started blaming the cats for the disease, and since cats were thought to be witches' familiars, the plague was also blamed on witches. And so the Black Cat, with its association with both witches and death, became linked to Halloween up until today. Apples have also been associated with Halloween for centuries. Apples become ripe in the early fall and so have been a harvest symbol for ages. Bobbing for apples is a children's game played on Halloween night. This game started as a divination game. Divination games, or fortune-telling games, were a large part of Halloween celebrations in Britain, and have only recently fallen out of the Halloween canon. Bobbing for apples was a way to find one's future spouse. The apples would be cut with the initials of all the young men and women in a town, and which apple you bobbed would tell you the identity of your future love. Trick-or-treating has multiple possible origins. One is a practice called souling. In the British Isles on All Souls' Day, people, especially the poor, would go house to house and offer prayers for the dead in exchange for food. They were usually given a soul cake, a small cake made from warm spices like ginger, cinnamon, and clove. Another precursor was guising. Guising involved people, usually children, dressing up in costumes and masks, and doing tricks or dances for money or food. It goes back to the 16th century in Scotland and may have started as a way to ward off angry ghosts by disguising oneself in a costume or mask. When the British came to what is now America, they brought many of their traditions with them. However, the Puritans forbade the celebration of Halloween, believing it to be both too pagan and too Catholic. Essentially later, during the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, millions of Irish immigrated to the United States and brought their Samhain celebrations. As the Irish were largely Catholic, celebrating All Hallows Tide was no problem. They also brought most of the traditions that we've talked about already, like jack-o'-lanterns and the precursors to trick-or-treating. Halloween really took on its modern character in the early 20th century, especially after World War II. Halloween, for a long time, had been a night of mischief, where young adolescents would spend the night playing pranks and causing destruction. The advent of trick-or-treating, as well as Halloween parties, were in part invented as a way to alleviate this mischief and get the young boys and girls doing something less destructive on Halloween night. With the economic boom after World War II, as well as the suburbanization of the American public, trick-or-treating, which had been mainly an East Coast tradition, spread throughout the whole US, and then to other parts of the world. Nowadays, Halloween is a multi-billion-dollar industry, with candy alone bringing in over $2 billion in sales annually. Every year, cities and towns all over the world celebrate Halloween with festivals, parties, trick-or-treating, and even religious observance. No matter how you celebrate Halloween, or which aspects of the holiday you celebrate, I hope learning its varied and storied history can give you a deeper understanding of this hallowed night. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a good Halloween. Let us know in the comments any unique traditions your family or your community have. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and consider donating to my Patreon if you want to support the channel. And thanks again to Incogni for sponsoring. Bye!